No, go ahead. You were.
I was late, so my time has not been. I've been a few times. Your time.
I was gonna cut that out of the recording, but I might leave that.
Oh, I mean, anyone who's been listening to this for a while, I mean, come on, you got to know by now that I'm the late one, right?
It's also later for you in the day. It's the later day in the day, the harder it is to make it work, I feel like.
Well, I think I'm also the only one that commutes out of this board.
Yeah, you are.
Out of this panel, I'm the one that commutes. So
yeah, so you get a lot of grace.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Chase, you can leave that in now. Now that
yeah, we'll just leave it in there. And so, yeah, for those of us that are sitting back and listening, this is the Support Ops Hangout. I'm your host, Chase Clemens. This is the show that helps you deliver a better support experience to your customers. And so before we dive into what other random stuff we get to talk about on this show, we'll go ahead and meet the rest of the crew. So the habitually late one, you've met him now. That's Jeff from Wistia. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling great. I'm the star of the cold opener for today's episode.
You are. It's great. And so I should be fair. Like 80% of the time you're on time. So
I'll take I like it. I appreciate that. It feels charitable. I like that.
Oh, and
it feels charitable.
I was just trying to be nice. That way he doesn't quit and we have to be like, well, Jeff left the show because.
But now we have a great new co-host or whatever. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, keep me around.
Yeah, and then the other third of this trio for today, Carolyn from Buffer. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. This is going to be a fun one, I can tell.
It is. Chase Livingston is out this week at the Grand Automatician Meetup. I have been practicing the word automatician all day to make sure I got it right. So
good job.
Yeah, thanks. Kudos to me. He was literally, so I'm sure we've talked about it before, but we kind of keep track of the show in Basecamp. Plug for Basecamp. The comment that we got about this show today from Livingston was literally, quote, I am out in a Land Rover trying to find bears around Whistler, so I won't make this one. Yeah, so that's where Livingston is. I'm going to try to get photographic proof of that so everybody can see. So let's talk about this particular episode. So on this one, the very first point of our manifesto is you first, put your oxygen mask on first. You can't help others when you're gasping for air yourself. But, when it comes to kind of support in general, we tend to struggle with this. Our entire job is taking care of others. But if you don't take care of yourself first, then you'll end up basically as a mess. So we're going to be talking about some self-care stuff. That's why I titled this one charitably Take Care of Yourself, which was fun. I like that one. Yeah, so let's kind of dive right in. Carolyn, we'll give you the first kind of swing on this one. What's some things that you're doing to make sure that at the end of the day, you're okay, you're not like just utterly exhausted and worn out and tired of this job?
So some things we do as a team to help combat that are we have a daily inbox meeting where, it's just good to have a little camaraderie. We do stay away from venting and talking ill of any particular situation or customer in that environment for many reasons. One of which is just, proven that venting does not usually help. It's just a dangerous thing to get into the habit of doing. Also, it takes up a lot of time, and meetings are just also very expensive in terms of hours. So that tends to stay quite positive. However, every person has a one-to-one with his or her team lead every single week. And that is in a space for a little bit more real talk. So if you're struggling or if there's something going on or there's one customer is just dragging you down because of, for whatever reason, you're just not speaking the same language. And you're not able to quite deliver the result that you want to and give the customer the experience that you want to, you can kind of say, help me out with this one. And the team lead can jump in and either take it or think about why that is. And the one useful thing about everyone having a one-to-one with the same team lead is that person can then identify is this just this one person who's having a little bit of burnout, and how can we think about this on an individual level? Do you need to take vacation? Do we need to think about, your individual contributions? Do we need to talk about praise? Like, are you frustrated because of the processes that are in place, et cetera? Or is this happening more widely, and is this more of a team challenge that we should tackle on more of a grand scale? So those are some of the things that we sort of start with.
Yeah, so I like the approach with eventing. It's probably not the best because with us at Basecamp, we don't really have inbox meetings or anything like that. But we're constantly in Campfire, our group chat all day long, and it can be real easy to kind of drop into this. Well, I just had this customer, and I can't believe that they're so frustrating, or insert your own negative word there. It might feel a little good at the moment, but then you look back, and if that's the only type of customer that you're talking about in your team's chat, like, that's problematic. It's one of those where it's not the best use of that space and just kind of brings up that negativity. My grandmother used to say, when it comes to negativity, don't speak it if you don't want it to be there. And I think that's true, especially on teams. Now, not to say you should just bottle everything up. The idea there with, being able to talk with your team lead, those one-on-ones, that's really helpful. So I think that's a really great idea there. Jeff, anything similar over at Wisty? I mean, it's kind of a little bit different. You're there in the office every day. So you get to see each other, and probably, I don't know, is it a little bit easier to recognize if somebody's not taking care of themselves?
They're just not taking care of themselves. They're a mess. Yeah, it's easier to pick up on frustration. I think there's just more possible cues than there are when people are remote. And I think what I would say, just taking a step back around like how you ultimately take care of yourself, or how I recommend teammates do that, is, even though it can feel repetitive, go back to the purpose, like, again and again and again, so that people don't get into this sense of like, I'm an automaton, like, I am here to answer emails and get yelled at. Go back to the purpose all the time, and make sure that something that I think Olivier and Sarah May, our team leads on the support team, do a great job of, is when they see either great customer feedback in like the CSAT survey, or when they see great customer feedback come through in our NPS survey that has to do with support, they're posting that in the Slack rooms where the support team hangs out the most, and they're putting it also in the team chat so that the entire team can see that and celebrate that. So I think having that sense of purpose is huge. And another part of it for me that's like, it's not venting, but it's understanding, is making sure that you're encouraging support team members to ask those really hard questions that come up when you're new. Like, this is a bug. Wait, so this is a bug, and this is been a bug for 6 months. Why can't we fix it? And there's one world where you're like, shh, like, don't say anything, like, that's not for you to figure out. There's another world yeah, exactly. There's another world where you are encouraging that person to ask that question more widely, or you're pointing them to some sort of resource that's been created transparently internally around how you figure out what to fix and how to prioritize what you're fixing and when. So that people have a real, like, when they're communicating with customers, they're not just making excuses, they have an actual understanding. So for us, there is time set aside in our weekly cycles to work on bugs, but that doesn't mean that we have them all resolved, right? And so a support team member or anyone talking to a customer should always be able to say, what's our policy around this? Like, are we ever going to work on this? What should I tell the customer, instead of it being kind of like a templated response? That is what I feel like gets people into that situation of being burned out and no longer into the work, or feeling like self-esteem around the work that they do.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned earlier, kind of being able to pull those customer comments out of CSAT scores and things like that. We straight up stole an idea from, was it Simon over at Automatic? Or it was one of them. It was a happy file, right? So it was, I think at their level, it was like they were keeping different good customer interactions they had in their own personal little file. We kind of expanded that out a little bit. And so we do basically any good reviews or feedback or anything else that we get goes into one central place in Basecamp called a happy file. And that can be anything from tweets that we're seeing to comments from customer emails that we're seeing to even down to we'll take screenshots of the iOS and Android app reviews and throw those in there. And it really helps when you're completely just exhausted from a day. You're bummed out about, it seems like you've gotten nothing but just horrible customers interactions just back to back to back. It helps to go into that happy file and look at, this is why we're doing these things. These are people that are absolutely in love with the product and that and what we're doing with it. So having that kind of there is really just, it's so beneficial. Now, one thing I was going to ask you, when it comes to taking and sharing those into team chats and things like that, is that like an all day thing? Or is that just one here or there? How does that handle? Just because I kind of, if it's nothing but a stream of comments, I'd worry that I would just stop looking at it because it would just be oh, it's the same thing again. And maybe
I think
it's like that.
It's in the same channel where people are talking about, hey, does anyone know how to help this person? Or, hey, has anyone dealt with anybody from this company before? They seem to be having a problem that's specific to them. Or has anyone ever seen something funky with, Firefox 12 or something like that? And everyone's like, how the fuck is someone still on Firefox 12? Sarah May or Olivier might just hop in and say, I just have to share this and call out, what an amazing job Holly did or what an amazing job Jordan did or whatever. And it just gives everybody a minute to pause and say, oh, I'm not in my own little bubble, just taking on ticket after ticket. We're all working on this together. Everyone's doing, the best work that they possibly can. I think that maybe that is even more important when you can't see everybody else. A remote support team, you don't know if somebody else is just, taking a nap every couple of tickets because they want a break. You have no idea, especially if ticket numbers aren't all the same. I don't know. I can take lots of naps, so maybe that's just me. I can just see Carolyn rolling her eyes.
I didn't roll my eyes. I made challenge cake face at the idea that you can't tell if somebody is being effective or not.
I have no idea. I don't have a remote. We don't have a remote team to really track in that way. But I think if you're working through a queue and you're just heads down on hard problems all day and you look over at the numbers and somebody else has fewer tickets than you have day after day, you might get the sense of they're not, it gets into everybody's brain, they're not pulling their weight, or all these things are the things that lead to people feeling really frustrated and burned out. And I think what I think Olivier and Sarah May are doing is trying to get ahead of that as opposed to being reactive, trying to put processes in place that resolve the underlying problem. So yeah, I don't know, maybe other people feel it's too much, Chase, but for me, whenever I pop in there and I see a little comment about somebody, I love pressing the little emoji buttons underneath and just joining in on the parrot party, the dance party that everyone's having. It's wonderful to hear about somebody helping a customer and having them be psyched about it.
See, I can just imagine that conversation in Wistia being hey, is Jeff heads down on a problem over there, or is he just napping? Which one is it?
I did get caught napping in a room today, so.
Wait, actually?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So, Carolyn, what, you're kind of, not that you have this day all the time, but day from hell, right? It's just nothing has been going right. Everything kind of just, it wasn't wrong. It all went horribly wrong for whatever reason. How do you start fresh? Okay, so how do you end that day, right? And then how do you start fresh the next day without bringing all of that baggage from the day before?
Yeah, this is a good one. I'm going to plus one Jeff's comment about returning to the purpose pretty regularly. I don't know.
Plus one.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so easy to do it on the micro scale like that, but so it depends a little bit on what the day from hell comes from. If it's something that's out of our control versus we made mistakes, there's different emotions that go along with a lot of those things. But it's an interesting question because we were just talking about this because we're thinking about hiring again, and we're trying to seek out somebody who has this balance of being both like very, very dedicated to and unsatisfied when the customer is not having a good experience, and like a certain level of taking it personally, and like not resting when it's wrong, while also being able to kind of step out of the bubble and realize that like this in most situations is not life or death. It is a never ending thing, and like tomorrow's a new day. And like, it's kind of like the story of like the person who's walking along the beach and like picks up one of the starfish and throws it back in, and they're like, you'll never make a difference. There's like thousands that have washed up. And the person's like, I made a difference to that one. You know, like it's this funny line of being able to see the forest through the trees, which I think that's what it takes on a day like that, while still being very dedicated to fixing each one of those little things and being willing to put in the time and the effort that it takes to push those things through and allow your output, which is, things that you identify as a team that are wrong, or processes that could be improved, or things like that, allow that output to be other teams' inputs. That takes practice. And it takes a good lead who does regularly return to the purpose. We've been talking a lot about, a very specific, culture within the happiness team. We have values as a company, but what are we here to do? What's our micro space in that? What are our values? What are our goals? And I think talking on the higher level a little bit like that has exactly what Jeff was describing. Like, it just allows you to go like, oh yeah, this customer yelled at me, but first of all, this is going to be sort of a controversial thing to say, I think maybe, but first of all, like, if this is the biggest problem that this person has in his or her life, like, we should take it really seriously, because the biggest problem that they have is with us, but also like, in the much bigger picture, this is not something that is unsolvable. It's not something that we can't come back from as like a society, So having a little bit of perspective about that, obviously, balanced with trying to do your best for that person and being very sympathetic that when that is the biggest problem of your day, it feels really big. And just remembering like, I'm here to do this big task, not necessarily to take this one person from, miserable to happy. But I don't know. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's just, so when I was back at the deli, one of the things that I continually had to remind myself and everyone else was it's just sandwiches, right? it doesn't matter if it's a $5,000 order going over to a college because they're throwing some big alumni like luncheon or something like that. If somebody leaves out forks or a sandwich tray or cookies, or it's just food. Nobody died, like that. Even on the worst day at the deli, it was literally nobody died, which is a pretty okay day at that point. But I think, so I want to plus one of the things you said there. It takes practice. It really, really takes practice. It's so easy to fall into the, I've had another day from hell. So I'm going to kind of, do the same thing I did last time, which didn't help at all, but I don't know anything else to do. Like that, self-care and recovering from a day like that takes practice. You're not going to get it right on the first time. That's why there's a whole industry devoted to taking care of yourself and everything else. It only gets better the more you actually practice it. It's just like any other habit or any other goal or anything else like that. Jeff, again, since the difference here is, remote, non-remote, I want to kind of check in with you on that one. Like, so if, again, day from hell, like Wistia goes down, right? Or something like that, or you're fighting for hours, trying to keep up with a DDoS attack or something like that. What happens when y'all all actually do leave the office? Is it like kind of just everyone goes their own way, or is it like you kind of hang out with some more to decompress and kind of like, help everybody recover? Like, what happens then?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm just full of them today, just throwing them out.
I think different groups do it in different ways. Maybe like there's subsets of people who hang out together, but I I will say that one of the things I love the most is when it's kind of later. It's like for us, later means like 6:30, 7:30 and people are still hanging out in the office. The lamps, like people are turning on their little desk lamps and stuff, and it just has this much more tight knit feel to it than during the day where there's a lot of hustle and bustle, or people are. It's very rare that we're dealing with like one issue. It's more common that we're dealing with a number of issues across the platform, or difficult customers or whatever. And it feels really nice when it slows to a point that people could say across the table, like, man, like, how did your day go? Like, my day was kind of crazy. And to hear that other person say, like, I know, yeah, my day was crazy too. Like, I had this one customer who was like so upset about this feature that I never even thought of, or whatever the conversation is. It's just like all about being able to connect with another person in a way that's just to remind yourself that you're not alone, that you're doing it for this higher, like this bigger purpose, like that all the days add up in some way. I just feel like that is the most crucial part of like taking care of yourself and support, is that you're on a treadmill, I suppose. Like the inbox like fills up and then it empties out and then it fills up and it kind of goes like that, but that you're working towards something like with all these teammates. And that is what like fights off any kind of like burnout for me personally. It's knowing that, like, I don't know, we have maybe 15 support people and some dedicated customer success folks. And they're the reason why we have like the business we have. They take care of so many customers every day. And it's, any individual day might feel like you're just trying to clean out an inbox, but in total, it really is accomplishing quite a lot. So, I don't know. At the end of those days, hopefully there's individual wins to celebrate, and there's things to look forward to tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like another email, but at the same time, like at least with all of our apps, like our products, people use them to run their business. They're critical components of their business. They entrust to us. So it's, it might just be a failed video upload to you, but for them, that's like their new marketing video that they've going to get out today because it's like a big push for a campaign or something like that. Or, with Basecamp today, we had some problems with a Campfire Chat. So, it was literally like people were having trouble talking to each other in their business, like on their team, which is a big deal. So, we talked earlier about, it's just sandwiches, nobody's dying, but at the same time, like, you are doing fundamentally great work, even though it feels like it's just an email. And that's one of those where it can be hard to remember at the end of the day after you've done 150 of them and you just like want to log off and not talk to anybody at that point.
Well, it's important that the person that I was thinking of a very specific like setup in our office, like a very specific scenario, but it's also important that you have a chance at some point to talk person to person with someone who can help you with some of the big problems that you're facing, right? It's important that support people who are working on Basecamp have a chance to talk in some way directly, face to face, or, through some sort of chat, or video would probably be better than just text chat, with the engineering team or the product team who is then tasked with solving that problem. So it's not just kind of like separate silos where work happens and you have no idea what's happening. It's really, it can be painful, but it's so important when someone on our support team can say like, hey, I got to tell you, like, this is really, really hard for us to deal with. We don't have a good way of telling the customer why this thing that should work doesn't work. Like, they're really pained because they really wanted to get their, marketing video out, and this bug really prevented them from doing it. And it's doing it a lot. Like, can you just tell me a little bit more about why we're not working on this? That is so important. And I feel like it's rejuvenating on both sides. It connects the product or engineering person closer to the customer. And as long as it's not done in like an accusatory or like, I can't remember the word Carolyn used before, but it's so spot on, like a complaining or a venti way. It also makes the support person feel better because it's like they're listening, they're working on this, like they're trying to make it better.
Yeah, I feel like one of the number one things of like in my experience, burnout doesn't happen as a result of a bunch of really tough days. Burnout happens as a result of a bunch of really tough days where you can't affect change. And so that's, totally agreeing with the concept of like, it's great to go have a beer after work, but it's even better, or it's different, I guess. They serve two totally different purposes in terms of the recovery concept. But to be able to say, okay, this is my output. Now it's your input. Like if I'm having several, you're as a team, if my team is having like days from hell are going to happen, but if they are happening a lot, then that's a systematic challenge. That's not something that is really on us to continue to work on our self-care. Like if you're having to rely on self-care, having an oxygen mask is great, but you shouldn't really need to have an oxygen mask all that many times in a row.
It should not be you get on a plane and it's just automatic,
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another thing. Being able to say like, well, we had a day from hell, but here's the results of it. We've filed this many bugs. They've prioritized these issues or whatever it is. And that's really energizing.
Yeah. I think a certain amount of that is also trust in your leadership, that they're aware of those tough days and that they know like what the levers are to improve that. Because you don't want your manager or leader or whatever to just be like thrashing around, and every time that there's like a bad day, they're like overcorrecting, right? In the moment, you may be like, oh my gosh, this is such a problem. Like, I wish that they would just like change the whole company so that we could solve this problem. But if people, if we actually had that and people were changing the priorities of the business every day based on that day's emergency, people would leave. It would just be it would be complete chaos, and like you wouldn't feel anchored to anything. But you do have to have trust that over time, right, managers are aware of like, what Carolyn was saying before, like, has this person been pushed really hard? Have they taken a break recently? Like, are they having trouble dealing with like other coworkers or whatever? Maybe they just need like a little bit of a break or a new focus or something like that. You have to have that trust that people are aware of how many total bugs do we have, and do we have a system for addressing the most important ones, and on and on. You just have to have trust that management is aware and thinking critically about those day-to-day problems.
Yeah, and along those lines, like, I want to make sure for listeners, we've talked about it before, those taking breaks is really important, whether it's throughout the day. One of the things that I not lost, but like, so when I was working at the deli, it was mandated by law. It was a 15-minute break every 2 hours, and then an hour-long lunch every 4 hours if you're working. But I mean, so it was very set. The law says if you work this amount of hours, you have to take this break then, right? We kind of lose that, right? At least I did whenever I joined Basecamp. I have to make a dedicated, like I set an alarm on my desk to remind myself to get up and take a break from the screen every hour, every 2 hours. Make sure you take a lunch to get away from that. Don't work 10, 11, 12 hours just straight, because work can wait at that point, and along the same lines, I think I steal lots of ideas. I think I stole it from Dave Ramsey, but it was the 7-7-7. It was every 7 days you need a day off, every 7 weeks you need a weekend off, and every 7 months you need a week or more as a vacation. And I've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years or so, and it really is one of those things where it sounds dumb and cheesy at the very beginning, but it gives you a light at the end of the tunnel that you can kind of work to. Yeah, you might have had a day from hell today, but today is day 6. I'm getting a day off tomorrow. Like, I get to recover nicely.
That doesn't sound cheesy. I remember you saying that. I didn't.
Right?
Yeah, I definitely stole it from you, and I love it. The other one is 20-20-20. Every 20 minutes, take 20 seconds to look at something 20 feet away.
That one.
Eyes with the screen.
It's numbers, 20s and 7s. There you go. All right. Anything else before we brush up against our 30-minute time limit usually for these?
I want to add one thing.
Go for it.
Jeff didn't speak specifically to this, but just with the point of the later nights, I recently had my eyes opened to this perspective across all things, because we have a full-time inclusivity champion, or inclusivity catalyst, excuse me. And she's excellent, but her presence in a lot of meetings has helped me think on this level on much more, much greater frequency than I did in the past. And so I just want to make a point of saying, like, some people in their family setups, like that 6:37 thing where you're turning on your light and like hanging out, and in a lot of cases it's cracking open a beer or whatever. A lot of people don't have that luxury because they go home to a family or for whatever reason. And so if that is and similarly for us, we have the very similar but exact opposite problem of we don't do that at all, but somebody in a totally different time zone doesn't get any of that same sort of recovery chat talk that happens. So just try and think of those people separately and make sure that those people are being supported in a different or similar or, as much as equal as possible way.
Yeah, that's one thing that we've run into with. So, I mean, it's no secret that Basecamp is a big proponent of work can wait. It's you put in your 40 hours or whatever, and then like you don't owe the company any more than that. So there are some people that, I mean, take Sylvia and Tony, for instance. They, so they're an overnight crew, overnight for us. They live in Australia and Asia. So basically, they start their day about an hour and a half after I end my day, and they're finished like 6-8 hours before I even start my next day. So it's conceivable that it might be like weeks that I don't talk to either one of them, but you have to kind of make a dedicated effort to catch up with those kind of people, whether it's email or chat or video, whatever, right? But it takes a little bit of more effort, I guess, more work to make sure that happens. And there's always going to be some kind of outliers that's going to be the same way. I mean, even like with us, I mean, I never really got that whole 6-7 o'clock dinner thing until Elliot showed up, and it's like, yeah, that's like prime, like 5 o'clock. I'm done. Like, unless the building's burning down, don't talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we certainly have lots of people like that. And my hope is that they never feel like they have less of an experience. I think one-on-ones are great for that, like just like setting a process for those kinds of check-ins.
Yeah.
That being said, I really think that you lose something if your entire company behaves like that. I think you lose something, and I don't yet know how to get it back, or even if it's possible to get it back. And I'm sure that there are lots of people who would say, you just have to do it. Like, that's how you have a workplace that works for everybody. But I don't think that it's a guarantee that you do, because we're all in some ways like driven by everybody has that same experience where they're like, oh, early morning, it's so quiet. Middle of the day, it's crazy. Like, why is it so crazy? It's no different. It's just that like our emails are coming in and our phones are going off, or however we're wired, we're crazy. But there are just those quiet times that if you can find those, great things can happen. So maybe it's morning or maybe it's night, but I think I think that's why sometimes those small groups of dedicated people can do amazing things, is they get those times more often. So I think you have to find a way to support those people, but I still think you still run the risk of fundamentally losing something if you don't. Like a business that says like, hey, if we can't have that, we don't support that. MailChimp went through that when they started having overnight people in their Atlanta office. People just didn't stay late because it felt weird to be just like hanging out while someone else was like trying to do their workday. And I think it affects the business. Totally different show.
Different show.
Definitely not for me, because I'm no expert on this, but
neither am I.
I was going to say, I think most of us are just making it up as we go. All right, so that's our thoughts on this one. Let us know what you think. Hit us up. SupportOps@CO on is the website. @SupportOps on Twitter. One kind of big ask. We did it last week. We want to ask you again this week. We're lining up episodes for our next series, which is going to be a book club. Basically, we're going to pick 4 or 5 books and then spend probably 2 episodes on one book. That way we can kind of we're not trying to just shove it all into one episode. We've got a good list going so far, but we want to make sure that we get kind of all the best books that we can think about, and then we'll narrow it down and announce those probably next week sometime. But let us know, supportops.co or at supportops on Twitter. Let us know some of your absolutely required must-read, like this is the book that you give every new employee when they join your team. Let us know what those books are for you, just so people know some of the ones that we've already gotten. I was keeping a list of those somewhere. It's in Basecamp. Just one long pitch for Basecamp Buffer and
I have it up.
if you yeah, so Turn the Ship Around, Delivering Happiness, The Everything Store, Be Our Guest, Setting the Table, Checklist Manifesto, A More Beautiful Question, Creativity Inc., How to Win Friends and Influence People, Hug Your Haters, Delivering Happiness, and The Power of Full Engagement. So if you've got a book that's not one of those, or if one of those is just your favorite and we absolutely have to do a show on that one, let us know. At SupportUps Twitter, supportups.co, that's where you'll find us. So until we see you again next week, have an awesome week.